Well, hi there, Scott Baker.
Hi there. Yeah, I don't
Good
know
afternoon,
hi
Scott
there,
Baker.
Mikey. Yeah. Good afternoon. It's usually you say that. That just kind of
Yeah.
threw me. Good afternoon to you and to everyone. Lead better. That's what we're doing here, talking about today's field note from Admired Leadership. And I think we have coined a phrase here. The title of the field note is "Do you have mission charisma?" And I wasn't sure when I read the field note and began editing it for publication today. I thought maybe this is a phrase that I've just not heard before. But as I poked around, it's like it seemed to be kind of maybe Randall, when he was kind of working through the draft, kind of was like combining some ideas. But I like the heart of what it gets to. I think it's really effective.
Yeah, it's based on the idea that you don't necessarily need to be an extrovert in order to have the benefits of extroversion show up in your leadership.
The
We're not trying
benefits of
to,
extroversion. Okay.
yeah. So, I mean, that makes sense. Like, we're not trying to
Yeah.
turn
Yeah.
introverts into extroverts or extroverts into introverts. And by the way, um, our firm works with hundreds of leaders,
Right.
thousands over the history of a firm. And I think that I've heard more than once our most senior executive coaches saying the best leaders they've ever worked with have all been introverted, not extroverts.
Yeah.
And so
Right.
for those who are wondering, like, can I be inspirational and motivational even though I'm naturally introverted? Yes. And this is one of the ways to do it.
Yeah. So, and there's a matter of charisma here. We could probably widen it even to talk about the other elements of, what is known as executive presence or
Right.
gravitas. We kind of have some content, what we call the style code. So we could kind of poke into that a little bit. But let's get first to kind of an operating understanding that would work for both an extroverted leader, an introverted leader, somebody in a big organization or a small one, doesn't really matter. Because I think all of us can take a little bit of a jab to be like, there are all moments when we need mission charisma. This gives us a way to think about it. And thus we can actually kind of turn the dial up just when we need to. But it's
Right.
specifically talking about this idea that you might be an introverted leader. You might have your own sort of quiet way about you. But people are always going to be looking to you, particularly in those moments when you are defining the core values, purpose, mission of the organization, of the endeavor, of the project, of the game. They need to see that level of intensity, that little meter kind of just peak up enough to say, oh, this really matters.
Right. And it does really matter. I've found a study that specifically asks the question of internal student motivation, intrinsic motivation, related to both instructor attitude, instructor enthusiasm, and their teaching style. And it was a 3-year study that was done at a pharmacy school, Creighton University's pharmacy school. And over that 3 year, they had students fill out, surveys. So the students may have just thought of them as like end of semester surveys more than
Right. Yeah.
anything, evaluations. But the way that they set up the questions in particular allowed them to be able to see the correlation between high performance students, what their intrinsic motivation was to keep going. These were both students that were coming from off campus on, driving from miles away, and those that lived on campus. So they had all these factors in there. But as it relates to the correlation of that intrinsic motivation, students said that the mastery of a teacher's knowledge of the really didn't matter. The thing that mattered most for like sparking their intrinsic motivation to keep going was related to a teacher's enthusiasm and motivation and internal vitality. So
Yeah. Right.
while the students address the importance of content mastery and instructional methodologies,
Yeah.
it focuses on issues related to instructor attitude more than anything as the critical role in the learning process.
Well, I wonder if this applies. See if this works for you. There's the old phrase, the trite phrase, and I'll say it, and then let's rework it just a bit, which is that people won't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
Sure.
And we usually interpret that as, do they care about me? Right?
Yes.
Do I care about you? But
Right.
here, this is a little bit about saying you might be the master, you might have the skills, and you might have that subject matter expertise. And to some level, it's not how much you know about something, it's how much do you care about
Yes.
something, right? You
If
could be
you've
a
been
brilliant, yeah.
teaching that course for 10 years, you can say it backwards and forwards. And so it becomes so rote to you
It
that
doesn't,
you're
yeah,
not
it's lost its specialness. So like if you were wanting to train with a master chef, that chef could know every technique. The food could be delicious, but if you can tell that the chef doesn't care about the food anymore, right?
right,
Then you're not either.
right.
And so that's the part where the leader is having to say, all right, I need to be communicating, because we also do know you can be a quiet leader, but you are still a communicator. And when they look at the overlap in the what's the scientific term of the statistical factors that sort of measure where things overlap, there's a relevance word, but I can't remember quite what it is right the second.
The Venn diagram.
Yeah, it's not a Venn diagram. It's, darn it, no, this is going to throw me off for the rest of the time. But people think of a great leader, and then when they define a great communicator, they think of the same thing. Now, we think great communicator, oh, that's the person that's very vibrant, and they get out there. A leader has to be a communicator at one level or another, or they're actually not a leader, right, to some degree. But you can be a quiet, steady leader. And as you lean into these messages, you're going to have to demonstrate this, or it's going to self-select you out of this. So the question is, for all of us, there's a downfall. The field note talks about it, which is you might be the naturally charismatic leader, and it's all about you. And I actually have lost my vision and sight about, is this about you or is it about the organization? Is it about the team, what we're doing? No. Oh, it is just about you. I also don't care, right? So the question for both the outgoing leader and the internal and the quieter leader is, can you dial in and say, this is what matters most, and let's get our attention on this? And I think we can all do that.
Yeah. And so we encourage in that communication for people to dial in on what it is and how they talk about their vision and mission. And that it feels like you end up talking about it over and over again. And leaders ought to get good at defining their mission and talking about it extemporaneously and being able to, but the more important thing here is, like, you need to demonstrate that you care about it. So that's the behavioral question that I'm interested in. How is it in your phraseology that you end up communicating that you care, right? What is it?
And that care actually has to have something built around it. It's not just like, this is important, people, right? Okay, well, why is that? Like, I need to get a sense of what the purpose about this is. I think it was, I know you watched the Bear, right? And I think there was an episode a season or two ago where there were a lot of real life chefs around a table, and they were all kind of talking about how they started. And one person was like, I do this, but the cooking wasn't really the important part to me. And the other one, there was the person that was the jerk and the asshole, and they were just such a perfectionist. And then there was the person who was saying, this is what we're actually doing for people, right? And then you can imagine them with their teams in their environments, and you can kind of make your own rating about, well, who's going to have the longer lasting impact over time? But in any one of those cases, it can't be indifference. Right. So there's a lot of room here for you to bring your own style to demonstrating what you're caring about. And that's the question of, how do you want people to, how do you want to show up? How do people perceive you in that moment? What are they reading into this? Because as we always say in Admired Leadership, I can't see inside your head. It's words and actions. It's the things that you're demonstrating to me. And I like that about this idea around mission charisma, that charisma is not just this some sort of ineffable factor about, like, see, here people we watched on the Emmys last night, maybe. I didn't watch the Emmys last night, but you know what I'm saying. So can you demonstrate the acts of charisma? Because we can all get better at the behaviors of charisma.
Right. And so when I try to quantify charisma down to an action, I end up thinking back to examples of, like, the people who seem to be magnetic, right? And I think it almost always has this version of, like, you can see yourself in how much they care, right? And when they care about their subject matter and it really excites them, right? How do we maintain that in a way where it becomes infectious to others? Because that the infection rate is going to be the thing. It's going to take off if you can continue to show that excitement. So being able to maintain that excitement without it tipping over into something that feels phony or feels like it's too rehearsed, right? So how
Yeah.
do you advise the 15-year teacher who's been teaching the same pharmacy chemistry class forever and ends up getting low ratings in this study simply because they know the content too well, right?
Yeah.
So it's a matter of being able to tap into them actually giving testimony to why it is they're actually there. Like, allow them to crack open their soul a little bit in front of their students and show and say
Yeah.
why it is that they got started in this in the first place. Like, those are important little things, but without it, it's like it's hard to relate with a professor who's not going to give that to me.
Well, just your point about the professor, occasionally I'll mention Dr. Rob Gilbert, who's for 33 years has been doing a daily phone message called Success Hotline.
Right.
And he's been teaching at his school, Montclair State, I think for like, I don't know, 40 years, something like that. I think he's well into his 70s. If he ever hears this, forgive me, Dr. Rob, if I'm off a little bit on the timeline. But one of the things that he kind of made a point just a few days ago was, he's got some information. He has some content that he's trying to communicate, and he's very good at it. He teaches sports psychology. But as all of the students, and thousands of students that have come through over the decades into his classroom and out of his classroom, the thing that matters he really is kind of gauging this on, it's not the fact, it's not the point, it's not this idea, it's like, do they actually believe that he cares about this stuff? Are they still fired up because he's fired up about it? And if they're not catching that fire from him, then he knows he's failed, even if he properly communicated the points in the syllabus.
Right. Yeah, there's something about this idea of like, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's I become a fan of you when I'm watching you bare your soul. And I get excited about the fact that you're excited. It's like you've provided me to like, and maybe you didn't do it on purpose, but we're kind of recommending this, that you've bared your soul in such a way that you've given me the opportunity to become a fan of you.
Yeah.
But for some magical reason, it like works on my own heart and mind as well, and makes in your motivation somehow becomes my intrinsic motivation when I see that in you.
Well, we actually know that is true. The literature supports that. The research supports that there is an emotional contagion that happens. Yeah. And so that just is going to flex a little bit with a leader who, feels more, if they have that ability, that characteristic of openness in the big 5 aspect scale, how well are they going to open up about that? But we can all do it. That's the key about having a behavioral approach and not a purely psychological approach. And so that's why when we talk about, even in our style code content, you have leaders that have a natural lean. Some they lean more attractive, meaning people are drawn to them for they're likable. They want to hang out with everybody. And then there are sort of performance oriented leaders that are kind of always driving results. And the magic is, can you be the blend? Can you be the person that blends power markers and attractive markers to say, there are moments when I need you to listen to me. Yeah. And then I also need you to follow the direction that we're talking about here. And I can create that blend, and in such a way that what more noble thing could you do, actually, than to be able to distill the message and motives of a noble and worthy organization and get the people that are deeply involved, even tangentially involved, even from outside that might be attracted to be involved, to say, I want to be part of something like that. And by the way, that actually is a big part of the definition of charisma. The comedian Jimmy Carr, who I've spent a little bit of time with, in addition to being mildly offensive or very offensive at times, has deep essays on the idea of the difference between charisma and charm. Very different. But part of his definition in charisma is this idea of like, do people want to be a part of the party that you're having? Like, are they drawn to that? Right. And so you are that person in whatever organization or whatever team where you're leading, and you can invite people into that.
Right. Now, I mean, there's still more to talk about, like in the actual like specific behaviors of like, what do you actually do to make that happen? I'd love to see people be practical in our comment section to kind of mention what some of those things are. But it's a deep thing, and it's nice that you could see that extroverts as well as introverts would have just as much. You might initially accuse introverts of not doing this well, but I could see all kinds of barriers that extroverts don't kind of crack open their soul the way
Oh,
they
yeah.
should
Right.
either. Right.
Well, lots of exciting stuff there. Now, I do want to give you a little heads up on tomorrow. All right. So tomorrow's field note, everybody listening now gets a heads up. You'll know in the morning. It's the headline is not that controversial. Leading people who are in denial. Now, okay, you'll be like, all right, I know a few of those folks. I might have
Yeah.
to. When you get into the middle of this one about, well, there are certain things, certain behaviors that might work or might not work, or they just don't work that well. And then like, well, what does work? And there's one that's discussed that I think is going to be a little bit controversial. So I'll be interested to see what your thoughts are, Mikey, and what everybody else is thinking.
All right. Great. I look forward to it. Thanks for your time.
See ya.
Bye now.